Hello watch enthusiasts. Now today I'd like to talk about wristwatches which have an innovation, or at least an innovational quality, which has been developed specifically to make these watches better suited to their particular tasks, be that timekeeping, water resistance, or really whatever the watch is trying to do. And in a world where one sees a great deal of highly complicated mechanical watches being sold for several £1,000,000, with incredible craftsmanship and technology that goes into them, but of very little function on a daily basis, I find it's very refreshing to look at some watches which offer a truly functional technology in order to further the design or function of the watch, notably water resistance or accuracy. Now the first watch which I'd like to talk about is the Pita Oceana, and this is a watch which has really changed the way I've looked at dive watches in terms of functionality. Because here Pita has really taken a watch, and the watch design really, the dive watch, which hasn't really changed in terms of the way it operates. Now of course, advances have been made in the last 50 years, but nonetheless the original concept is very much the same, whereas here they've produced a watch which offers a very different approach to making a watch water resistant. And in this case, this is actually removing every connection really between the outside world and the inside of the watch. Now it's worth noting that in this case Pita have produced a mechanical watch. This watch includes an ETA 267 series movement, which is fairly rare to see. Most companies use 28 series movements. But here actually only 30% of the movement remains, because of several patented technologies which they have actually produced in order to allow this watch to have no crown. And this is that the back of the watch actually turns and has a magnetic connection between various parts of the movement and that case back, so you can change the time without actually directly touching anything inside the watch, which I think is an absolutely tremendous concept. Now this system is also housed in a titanium case, which allows this watch to actually be very light on the wrist. So the watch is only 41mm, but is I believe 17 or 18mm thick. So it is a thick watch, but that's due to the fact that it needs the space on the back in order to allow a firm grip on the winding and on the time-changing mechanism. But equally, with that titanium build, it's very light and very ergonomic, and with those hooded lugs, allowing for actually a very, very comfortable wear. Of course, all of these things amount to a watch which actually has, in my opinion, changed the way I look at dive watches. Because here we have a watch which is light, fairly minimalistic, and has very, very few points of entry for water, which means that they can actually increase the water resistance of this watch to 5,000 metres, which I believe is brilliant, really, considering this design, because this allows a watch which and allows a sort of an approach to dive watches which has never really been tested before by other brands. Other brands have never veered away from having a crown altogether, whereas here we see real innovation into producing a watch which approaches the issue of pressure very differently. Now the reason why I think this watch actually offers greater innovation to, for example, the Rolex Deep Sea Sea Dweller, which has a water resistance of 3,900 metres, to this watch's 5,000, is the fact that that merely attempts to solve the issue of water resistance by adding more case, more strength to the watch, whereas here Pita are entirely changing the type of approach that a watch takes to withstanding extreme pressure. And whereas I feel that Rolex, yes, produce an incredible watch with the Deep Sea Sea Dweller, but actually they aren't innovating, they're merely making a bigger Submariner steel with greater depths. Whereas here Pita, I believe, are really paving a way to a future of watches which don't simply take the traditional methods, but rather innovate to conquer these great extremes. Now, approaching this issue from a very different, in a very different way at least, Zin have produced a watch, the UX, which confronts this issue of water resistance differently. Now, Zin have, whereas Pita have gone for a watch which doesn't look normal at all, but can withstand these depths without points of entry, Zin have actually taken a very different approach. They haven't increased the resistance in terms of points of entry, but have rather negated the issue of pressure on the case altogether by filling their UX's case with oil. Now, I often talk about the UX because I think it's a tremendous innovation, a tremendous design concept, at the very least in terms of water resistance. But I do think that what they've done here is truly incredible. Now, whereas the Pita design, due to the fact that it has to change a great deal of things, is about £5,000, Zin have managed to make for about £1,500 a watch which can withstand the same depth and still be available in a package which is altogether more manageable. Now, it's slightly wider at 44mm, but is substantially thinner. This watch's innovation is clearly manifested by the fact that it's able to negate the 5,000 metres of water resistance it's capable of, simply by applying the same pressure outwards due to the fact there's oil in the watch, which exerts the same outwards pressure as would be exerted on the inside, thus negating the pressure entirely, which I think is an incredible consideration when the vast majority of dive watches are air-filled, which of course is far less dense than the surrounding water. Equally, due to the fact that they have chosen to use their UU series case, Zin are able to retain the ease of use of a standard watch, while still giving it the incredible water resistance it has. Now, of course, Zin have had to sacrifice using mechanical movement in favour of a quartz movement, simply because mechanical movement simply will not work under oil, due to the increased torque required to turn under that sort of that environment. But nonetheless, this watch is also a chronometer, and chronometer certified because they use one of these high-end quartzes instead. So in a way, this is a sort of a balancing act in terms of pluses and in terms of pros and cons, at least. Equally, Zin have also used technology of an interesting nature which has been seen before, but not on an oil-filled case, which is within this highly corrosion-resistant and highly scratch-resistant tegmented tegmented submarine steel case. They've included a case back which presses in, like a compressor case, I suppose, or like the case back on, for example, a Vostok Amphibia, which allows water resistance to increase as the pressure pressing down the case back increases. This next watch is one which has won a number of awards due to its technical innovation. And this is, of course, the Breguet Classique Chronométrie 7727. And I believe that, considering that Breguet make a great deal of tourbillons and incredibly innovative watches, but I believe that tourbillons, as beautiful as they are, and don't get me wrong, I think they're incredible in terms of craftsmanship and design, they don't offer the functionality which you would perhaps expect for the price. They're beautiful and a wonderful thing to see, but they don't offer direct functionality. Whereas in this case, Breguet have really innovated to make something truly accurate in terms of a purely mechanical timepiece. And this is, of course, a watch which beats an incredibly high beat count. So whereas most watches will beat at 4 Hz or 3 Hz, so 21,600 beats per hour, or 28,800 beats per hour, this watch beats at 10 Hz, that's 72,000 beats per hour, which, in my opinion, is absolutely baffling. It's unbelievable that they're able to bring a mechanical movement, a purely mechanical movement, up to this beat count. Equally, functionality is increased furthermore by the fact that this watch has, and this is in my opinion the most interesting part of the watch, magnetic pivots. And this is to say that around the balance wheel there are magnets on each balance staff. And what this allows is for really any shock on this watch, which would normally disturb the alignment of the balance wheel, thus destroying accuracy, to be negated by the fact that the balance wheel actually floats in this sort of artificial gravity, if you will, induced by these magnets, which means that it, if dropped, for example, or bumped, will realign in order to keep the watch running, which I think is a fantastic and very, very innovative feature, which really does show consideration on Breguet's part, not to simply bring out a watch with a new tourbillon or a double tourbillon, but rather come out with something which has real applications and real purposes. Equally, all of these details lend themselves to a watch which actually does offer greater accuracy than really anything else in terms of timekeeping. And this is with regards to the fact that it has a very, very high beat count, thus reducing the chance of a change in timekeeping with regards to each beat being slightly off. Equally, that shock resistance means it's very, very unlikely that the watch will be knocked in such a way that there'll be an inaccuracy, making this watch truly very, very reliable in its timekeeping. because a lot of watches state their timekeeping in terms of +2, -2, or whatever the regulation happens to be. But that can be very, very variable, considering I've heard of, for example, chronometer-certified Rolexes being perfectly fine the first day, being bumped ever so slightly the second day. And whether it's by bad luck, I doubt by bad craftsmanship, just by bad luck, their timekeeping is affected very, very badly, whereas here you have a watch which will consistently be extremely accurate, which is really something very, very impressive and really does show consideration on Breguet's part. Next we have the Ressence Type 3, and this is an interesting watch on the basis that it offers, I would argue, that the greatest legibility of any watch on the market now. And this is achieved through, similarly to the way Zin use oil in their UX. Here, oil is used to fill the top half of the watch, including the sapphire crystal and the space between these rings, which display the time and the crystal, with 35.7 milliliters of oil. And this allows a sort of a negation between the refractivity of air and sapphire crystal, thus allowing a perfectly legible watch, which means there is never any reflection on the crystal. It means there's always a perfect view of the dial. Equally, it does allow a certain deviance in terms of a deviation in terms of temperature, which is something which a lot of oil-filled watches have difficulty with. Equally, the use of discs on the dial rather than hands offers greater legibility, because the whole dial turns in different ways, which used when looking at the watch does give a much clearer indication of things, rather than having to look at a particular part of the dial to read a particular time or fact about the time or day. Here it's all shown very, very clearly before the reader. Equally, the dials can move around inside the watch because they are on a pivot, so you can actually turn the entire inside of the dial at different angles to show various different times and so on, which is again a really inspired concept, and one which, I've never seen on a watch before this timepiece. And this does make a dress watch / sort of pseudo sports watch for those who are interested in something that looks extremely different. Of course, since this watch, the Type 5 has been released as well, which acts as a more rugged version, a more rugged diving version of this watch. Though I feel this watch adds better legibility simply due to the fact that it has that very simple domed crystal rather than the more elaborate bezel dome crystal which is seen on the Type 5. And this was really the genesis, if you will, of this design and the making of it, so I believe this is the one to talk about, really. Now finally, I think this video would definitely not be complete without including a Grand Seiko spring drive. These watches are, in my opinion, really innovative beyond other watches which are mainstream, or at least available in the mainstream from a major manufacturer. Now the concept of spring drive is that as the balance wheel, as the mechanical movement turns, it's able to through induction effectively power a quartz or at least electric movement of the hands, thus meaning completely smooth movement of the hands and incredible accuracy. Now, I shan't go into the exact technology and the manner in which it's done, simply because it's a very complicated and very long-winded fashion, but suffice to say that it's a hybrid between the mechanical and the quartz aspects of timekeeping. So it includes the craftsmanship and the beauty of mechanical watches, with the sheer accuracy of quartz. Now, of course, to someone who enjoys high beat movements, one can't really reach any higher beat than this watch on the basis that its hands sweep perfectly, because they're electronically powered, not directly driven by the mechanical movement, which is a very interesting concept and one which is very novel, really, because people tend to categorise mechanical and quartz as being two very separate concepts in terms of timekeeping and timepieces. But here we see them amalgamated into really the ultimate fusion of the pros of both systems, and really does allow someone who wants the craftsmanship of a mechanical watch to enjoy the advantages of a quartz movement. However, what I find most unbelievable about these watches is the way in which Seiko is able to produce them at such a remarkable price. Now, these watches are by no means easy to make, and they're extremely carefully and beautifully finished in terms of movement finishing, and equally in terms of dial finishing, case finishing, and so on. Though, of course, those things aren't really related to the innovation of this watch. They do really make tremendous cases and tremendous dials, and not to mention the wonderful design of their watches. But equally, they offer these watches for approximately £2,000 less than the equivalent Rolex. And this really does baffle me. The way in which they're able to produce these at this price, with this craftsmanship, really is beggars belief. Anyway, that concludes my video of what I think are the most innovative new technologies in new watches on the market today. So I'll end on this picture of this beautiful Grand Seiko GMT spring drive. So thank you very, very much for watching, and do like, share and subscribe if you did enjoy this video and would like to see more on this channel. Equally, please give me your comments and your views on watches which you think would have made it onto this list, because I'm very curious to hear. So thank you very much for watching. This is Arm on the Watch Guy, over and out.